So we have one more sermon, another sermon of thriving in the valleys. You might say, why are you doing all this, talking about negative things of life and all? And sometimes it's good, though, that we examine those things. But sometimes we try to shuffle them under the rug, and not even talk about them. We need to know what to do when those times come, so we're prepared for them. Today we're going to talk about Joseph thriving through the valley of suffering. As we continue in our series, this message today will cover what I believe is one of the most difficult valleys in life. We're going to discover in ourselves the valley of suffering. We're going to journey through one of the most powerful stories of all Scripture, the life of Joseph. It's when life takes everything. Some valleys last hours. Joseph's lasted years. Joseph was sold into slavery at age 17. We read in Genesis 37. He was imprisoned in his 20s and elevated to a position of power at age 30. Genesis 41:46. If your lifetime feels delayed, if your lifeline feels delayed, you're in good company. Many of us are not just in a valley, we're living there. Health, finances, family betrayal, false accusations, being forgotten. Just a few of the things that can go wrong. Joseph was a man who seemed to have it all, though, when we first meet him, only to have it all taken away from him, not once, but repeatedly. He was betrayed by his family, sold into slavery, and then unjustly thrown into prison. He experienced the deepest of valleys of suffering, yet he didn't just survive. He thrived. His story is a powerful testament to a profound truth. God works in all things, even calamity and immense suffering, for his ultimate glory and our good. Remember, we're trying to learn how to not simply survive the valleys of life, but to thrive in them. The question is, how do we not just survive the valley, but thrive? How do we do that? Joseph's story shows three pathways God uses to grow people in the dark. So let's see how we can not just survive the valley, but thrive. We will cover various aspects of Joseph's life, as found in Genesis 39 through 50. So let's begin at 39, verses 1 through 10. Come on. Joseph became hated by his brothers, in part because he was the favorite child of Jacob, and in part because Joseph came across to his brothers as a bit obnoxious. His brothers were going to kill him, but then decided to sell him into slavery. Here's that part of the story. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who'd taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. And then he made him overseer of the house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was that from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all he had in Joseph's hands, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was a handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. "Lie with me," but he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house. He has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in the house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do such great wickedness and sin against God? So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her to lie with her or be with her. Genesis 39, 1 through 10. Brings us to our first main point today. Come on. Thriving through suffering with integrity. Imagine your father asks you to go find your brothers in the field in the flock with flocks to check up on their welfare and report back to him how the brothers and flocks are doing. You find them, and the next thing you know, they throw you into a well after they take away your tunic your father gave you. The brothers want to kill him, but Reuben steps in and stops the killing. Your brothers throw you into a well and sell you to slave traders. Talk about a rough day. I don't think very many of us had a day like that, but that's a rough day. Joseph finds himself in the house of Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh. Genesis 39:2 tells us, the Lord was with Joseph. He was successful and lived in the household of the Egyptian master. Joseph could have become so bitter at the injustice he had just suffered through the hands of his brothers. Could have. How did Joseph handle the valley of suffering? Even in slavery, Joseph did not compromise. He worked hard so diligently and with such character that his master put him in charge of everything. We can often be blind to God's leading and to his kindness in the midst of suffering. You do the best you can, right? Even when Joseph was sold into slavery, God was with him. Sometimes we don't feel that way, do we? But God is with us, no matter our circumstances. Although Joseph was a slave, the Lord did not forsake him. Instead, he prospered him during this time in Potiphar's house. Not in the way we think of it today, but in the way you could as a slave. But eventually it led to his imprisonment under false accusations. His first advantage was that he was not a field laborer. Like many slaves, Joseph became a house servant for Potiphar. His master observes that Joseph carried on his duties with unusual efficiency, and dispatch, and this was due to the blessing of the Lord. All was going well until Joseph caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. The situation tested Joseph's integrity. She tries to seduce Joseph. In verse 9, Joseph tells her, there's no one greater in this household than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. And how could I go do such a great evil and sin against God? Joseph knew his actions were about his relationship with God, not just a man and a woman. His integrity wasn't just about refusing temptation. It was about his consistent character. And we talked about that last week with Daniel and his consistency in his prayer. Joseph shows it in his consistent daily activities, his daily life. He worked as if his master's business was his own. And not because he was being watched, but because he was a man of principle. You do your best. You keep on keeping on. This is what made his refusal of Potiphar's wife so powerful. It wasn't just a sudden burst of goodness, but the result of a life lived with integrity before God. And he was not just saying no to sin, he was saying yes to his identity as a child of God. Even when it seemed that no one was there to see, Joseph refused her advances. In verses 8 through 10, he gives her 3 reasons for not accepting her offer. When temptation tests, loyalty to people My master has not kept back anything from me but you. Temptation tests loyalty to God. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? When temptation tests loyalty to boundaries, he refused and would not listen or be with her in verse 10. In verses 11 through 20, Potiphar's wife makes a final attempt at Joseph. He refuses and runs out of the house. She grabs his cloak and then acts like Joseph tried to make sport of her. So, brings us to another question. What is integrity? Integrity equals integration, the same person at home, at work, and under pressure. Once you establish that standard that you want to live by and you choose to live by, you stay that way, the same, no matter where you're at. It's not sinlessness or instant vindication. It's faithful consistency when obedience costs. Joseph loses his cloak again and keeps his character, 37:23. 39:12. Garments lie, characters doesn't. Now, you know the old saying, really old, when you look at the way it was phrased, clothes make the man. That's not true. These things wear out. They become raggedy. Then what are you? If that's what... No, the man makes, or the woman makes the clothes. Garments lie, character doesn't. Given Joseph's situation of being sold as a slave by his brothers, he could have been consumed by anger towards God and vengeance toward his brothers. Joseph, though, maintained his integrity in the valley of suffering. All is well, right? Now, let's look at what the Bible says. Genesis 39:20 through 23. Then Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And there he was in prison. But, Howard keeps throwing that up there. But, what about? But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. And he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. Now, a lot of prisons, they have sort of a semi-official status of prisoners called a trustee. They can do various things in the prison or the jail, whatever, that other prisoners can't because they're trusted. And that's kind of what Joseph was. He was like the trustee, the main one. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Genesis 39:20 through 23. So that brings us to our next lesson. Thriving through suffering with faith. You don't let your suffering shake your faith. Integrity anchors the heart. Now we need faith to wait while God works, and Joseph's no to sin becomes a yes to God's timing. Notice, not our timing, God's timing. Let's watch faith work in the waiting. The poor guy cannot catch a break. It goes from bad to worse for him. He went from slavery, which could have been much worse for Joseph, to prison. Joseph pays what seems to be a high price for his integrity. Doing right may make life more difficult, at least for a while. Joseph is in charge in the prison because God is with him. Chapter 40 tells us about that. While in prison, Joseph has the opportunity to interpret the dreams of a former cupbearer to the king, as well as the former baker for the king. And we read about some of that in Genesis 47 and 8. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his house, saying, Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph told them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Genesis 40, verses 7 and 8. So because he's such a trusted position, he gets people to confide in him. People talk to him. People trust him. Joseph tells the men that not only God can interpret the dreams, and then proceeds to ask them to tell him their dreams. It is fascinating to note that Joseph interpreted the dreams for others while his own dreams were deferred. He didn't let delay become disillusionment. He trusted God's timing. Genesis 41:16. Because of time, I'm not going to go into detail. Joseph's interpretations of dreams came to pass, and he asked the cupbearer to not forget him when he was restored to his position. The cupbearer forgets about Joseph, though. For 2 years, he forgets about him, until he finds that Pharaoh's having trouble with dreams and tells Pharaoh about Joseph. "Oh, yeah, there's that guy in prison. He interpreted my dreams." So Joseph shows us that he must remain faithful in the in-between. When people say, "Oh, yeah, I remember you," but then forget you quickly. When promise hasn't yet become reality. I mean, you think about it. Abraham lived 147 years. Did he get what was promised him? One thing. Isaac. Which brings us to the question today. Are we serving faithfully even when our prayers seem unanswered? Do we still keep on believing in God, keep serving with the same desire and strength? When Joseph is brought before Pharaoh to look at the exchange in 41:15 and 16, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I've had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it." So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh the answer of peace." Genesis 41:15 and 16. Once again, Joseph gives the glory to God, saying it's God that's going to answer Joseph's question, Pharaoh's question. And that gives us an example of faith that works. Your faith can work for you. Joseph's faith worked for him. Joseph's example illustrates 3 characteristics of valley faith. Waiting faith trusts God's timing. The word of the Lord tested him. Psalms 105:19. Until the time that his word came to pass. Working faith, staying faithful to the little things in obscure places. And there's witnessing faith, gives God credit under pressure. How many times do we give God credit for the things that go right in our lives? When people are asked, maybe ask you about, "Wow, that went wrong, but it certainly worked out for you." Did you give God the credit? I hope you did. Joseph could have been furious with God for everything that happened to him, but he remained loyal even when it seemed God had abandoned him. His last chance, the cupbearer forgot all about him, all the things that God had done. Yes, Joseph was successful in Potiphar's house until the wife got him tossed into prison. Once in prison, he was successful, interpreted the dream of the cupbearer, yet he was still stuck in prison for another 2 years. Wow. Joseph is placed second in charge of all Egypt. Now, there's a little issue with the brothers. It's not resolved yet. I didn't cover this, but one of the things that made the brothers hate him is the fact that he revealed 2 dreams that God gave him in which the brothers would one day bow down to Joseph. They didn't like that. This was so over the top that Jacob, his father, rebuked him. Well, they say dreams come true. During the famine, the brothers came to Egypt. I'm omitting many details due to time constraints, but the brothers did not recognize Joseph. He tested them and ultimately revealed his identity to them. By the way, they did bow down to him as God revealed to Joseph. Just as that dream happened, it happened. Genesis 45, 1 through 3. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. Genesis 45, 1 through 3. Which brings us to our last point. Thriving through suffering with the right attitude. I'll never forget, I did something around the house one day that Marion wanted me to do, and had been kind of poking at me to do, and I finally did it. Was she happy? No. Why? Because I didn't do it with the right attitude. Just get the pressure off my back. You know, that's not the way you do things or why you do things. And that's certainly the way in our service for God. We don't do things just because God demands it of us. We gladly do that. So I want to keep this point short. Joseph could have been very bitter about the actions of his brothers and his feelings towards God. However, Joseph maintained the right attitude throughout it all. When he revealed himself to his brothers, were they not only dumbfounded but also terrified? What would Joseph do to them? How would he pay them back? Ooh. That's what we did. Genesis 45, 4 through 8 tells us that, and Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near, and he said, "I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt." Again, Genesis 45, 4 through 8. So Joseph was able to stay strong with the right attitude because he knew God had a plan. And now he knew the plan. Does God have a plan for you, your life? I hope you think so. I hope you believe so, because he does. As a final thought, when Jacob, their father, died, and the brothers still thought Joseph would get his revenge on him, they thought the only thing keeping the vengeance of Joseph from them was the fact that Dad was still alive. And Genesis 50, 18 through 20 tells us, "And then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for I am in the place of God. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive.'" Genesis 50, 18 through 20. Verse 20 is very powerful. Joseph's story ends not with revenge, but with a refrain. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. The same God is with you in your valley. Whatever you're facing, whatever problems you have, God is with you. Integrity may cost you. Faith may keep you waiting, and the right attitude may stretch you. But the cross and the empty tomb prove he wastes nothing. So hand him your cloak and keep your character. Wait and work while he weaves. Forgive and bless where you were wounded. Trust the God who turns evil into good. And let's change lives by connecting people with Christ. Whatever your need this morning, will you come forward as we stand and sing the song of invitation?